My obese neighbor truly believed that no man could ever love her again. And I'm the man who finally proved her wrong. I'm Marcus, 36 years old, a complete stranger when I moved into apartment 4A on a cold October afternoon. I didn't move in looking for love. I wasn't searching for anyone. But the moment I saw her, the woman in 4B, something inside me stopped completely. And it wasn't her size. I want to be honest about that. It was the way she walked. The way she pressed herself against the hallway wall when I passed her. Like she was apologizing for existing in her own home. The way her beautiful brown eyes dropped to the floor the second mine found hers. Like she was sparing me the embarrassment of having to look at her too long. Someone had trained her to do that. And I hadn't even said hello yet. And I already hated him. I'd find out later his name was Derek. That he'd promised to marry her. That 2 months before their wedding, in a crowded restaurant, he told her she had let herself go, stood up, and walked out, leaving her sitting alone while the entire room pretended not to stare. She walked home by herself that night. She never let anyone close to her again. For 2 long years, she carried his words like a life sentence. She made herself smaller, quieter, almost invisible. She buried every drop of love she had left into a tiny cake business, designing breathtaking wedding cakes for other people's happy endings from behind a tightly closed apartment door, while quietly swallowing the belief that she would never have a happy ending of her own. But the more I lived next to her, the soft music drifting through our shared wall at night, the warm smell of lavender honey at midnight, the brilliant, funny, gentle woman I kept catching glimpses of when she didn't think anyone was watching, the more I knew one thing deep in my chest. She was wrong about every single word of it. So the night the whole world finally told me to look away from her in public, I did the only thing my heart would allow. I stepped closer instead. What did she do when a man finally refused to walk away from her? What did she whisper the moment she realized I wasn't going anywhere? And what did it cost her? What did it cost me to undo 2 years of believing she would never be loved again? Let me take you back to the beginning. October 3rd, a Tuesday. I had 3 cardboard boxes, a bruised ego from a job that had quietly swallowed 7 years of my life, and one promise I made to myself, that this new chapter was going to be different. I moved into apartment 4A of the Alderton building on Piedmont Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina, with absolutely no idea what was waiting behind the door of 4B. I heard her before I saw her, a soft shuffle in the hallway, the quiet click of a lock, and then, just as I stepped out holding a lamp with nowhere to put it yet, there she was. She was a full, beautiful woman. Dark hair twisted up in a knot, losing the fight against gravity. Honey gold skin, brown eyes that were, for exactly 1 second, looking directly into mine. Then she looked at the floor, and she pressed herself, almost gently, against the hallway wall, as far from me as the space would allow. I watched her walk to the elevator, shoulders pulled in, head slightly down, moving through her own building like an uninvited guest, trying not to take up too much of anyone's air. Something shifted deep inside my chest. I didn't know her name yet, didn't know her story, but in 10 seconds of watching a complete stranger walk down a hallway, something in me already knew. Someone had done something terrible to this woman. I just had no idea how terrible. The first week we exchanged quiet nods. She'd give me the small, careful smile, the kind that keeps the door locked while being too polite to say so. And I'd say good morning, and she'd say it back, and that was that. But then came the night everything changed. It was just after 7 on a Thursday when it hit me like a wall. A smell. Warm, sweet, buttery, threaded with something soft and floral I couldn't name, sliding under my front door and filling my entire apartment until I was standing perfectly still in the middle of my half-unpacked living room, thinking, what on earth is that? I knocked on 4B. She opened the door a few inches, just enough, the way a woman opens a door when she has learned, from painful experience, to look very carefully before she trusts. There she was, up close for the first time, a dusting of flour on the left side of her hair, a smear of something golden on her wrist, and those brown eyes, cautious but quietly beautifully alive. I'm Marcus, I said, 4A. Something coming from your apartment is making it physically impossible for me to unpack. She blinked. Then, just barely, the corner of her mouth moved. Lavender honey cake, she said. I'm testing a recipe. For what? I asked. That pause. That small war on her face, pride trying to stand up straight, and the deep-trained reflex trying to push it back down before anyone noticed. Custom cakes, weddings, celebrations. I run the whole business from home. Fast, like a disclaimer. Like she was pre-apologizing for it not being impressive enough. I looked past her shoulder and saw the most beautifully organized baking workspace I had ever seen inside a home. Tiered cake stands lined like a gallery. Color-coded tools arranged with surgical care. And on the wall, a hand-painted wooden sign that read, Vivian Hartley Confections. That is extraordinary, I said. Not flattery, just the plain, undecorated truth. She didn't know what to do with it. You could see it. The way someone looks when their heart wants to believe a compliment. But their mind has been trained to reject it at the door. I'll probably have extras later, she said quietly, if you want to try some. That is the greatest offer I've received since moving in. She almost smiled. A real one. Then softly closed the door. That night, a small plate appeared outside my door. One perfect slice. Ivory frosting smooth as fresh snow. A single sprig of dried lavender pressed on top like a tiny signature. And beside it, a handwritten note. Be honest, does the lavender overpower? I ate 2 pieces standing at my kitchen counter, without sitting down once. Then I wrote back. The lavender is the most unexpectedly wonderful thing in this apartment. Marcus, 4A. An hour later, a note slid under my door. You're very easy to impress. I read it, set it down, picked it up, read it again. I didn't know yet what Derek had done to her. Didn't know about the restaurant, the words, the night she walked home alone in the dark. Didn't know that the woman who had just made me smile harder than I had in months was quietly running on empty. Pouring everything she had into a world she'd already decided would never pour anything back. I didn't know any of that yet. But I knew one thing. I was going to knock on that door again. The days after that note felt different. I won't pretend they didn't. I started noticing things I had no business noticing. The exact time her door clicked open in the morning. The particular kind of music that meant she was working. Stevie Wonder, usually, low and warm through our shared wall, versus the music that meant she was having a hard night. Anita Baker. Always Anita Baker when something in her was heavy. I know how that sounds, I know. But here's the thing about living alone in a new city. You pay attention to the sounds around you. You map the building the way you'd map a new country. And Vivian Hartley was the most interesting country I had ever moved next to. The second knock happened 3 days later. Not planned. A package had been delivered to my door by mistake. Her name on the label, her business address listed as 4B. Vivian Hartley Confections. The box was light but carefully sealed. The return address, a specialty baking supplier in Virginia. I held it for maybe 2 seconds longer than necessary before walking across the hall. She opened the door a little wider this time. Not much, but wider. This came to my door, I said, holding it out. She looked at the package, then at me. Something behind her eyes was calculating, still deciding, always deciding, whether I was safe. Thank you, she said, started to close the door. Are those the gold leaf sheets? I asked. I had absolutely no idea what was in that box. But I had seen the gold leaf pressed along the edges of her cakes in her Instagram photos, and I took the shot. She stopped. How do you know about gold leaf? I looked up your business, I said honestly. Your Instagram. Your work is. Vivienne, those cakes look like architecture. The door stopped moving. She stood there for a moment, holding the box against her chest, and I watched something cross her face that I hadn't seen before. Not the careful smile. Not the polite deflection. Something real. Something she hadn't meant to let out. They're just cakes, she said quietly. No, I said, they're not. She looked at me for 3 full seconds. Then she said very softly, I have a consult in an hour, and closed the door. But that night, the smell of something warm and citrusy drifted under my door. No note this time, just a small plate of lemon butter cookies, with a thin line of gold leaf pressed across the top of each one. I sat on my kitchen floor, eating them one by one, and stared at the wall we shared and thought, who hurt you, Vivian Hartley, and why did they think they had the right? Oxybersos moved slowly the way good things do when you're paying attention. We built something in that hallway, something small and careful and real. The kind of thing that grows in the margins of ordinary life. A held elevator, a shared laugh about the broken hallway light that maintenance had been promising to fix for 3 weeks, a 10-minute conversation about nothing important that somehow left me standing at my own door afterward, not quite ready to go back inside. She was funny. That was the thing nobody would have known from watching her press against that wall. Sharp, precise, perfectly timed. The kind of funny that sneaks up behind you and taps you on the shoulder just when you thought you were safe. She made a comment one evening about the couple in 3C who had screaming arguments every Tuesday, like it was a scheduled appointment. And I laughed so hard I had to put my hand against the wall to steady myself. She looked surprised by that, by my laugh, like she hadn't expected it to be that genuine. You're actually funny, I told her. Don't sound so shocked, she said. I'm not shocked, I said. I'm delighted. There's a difference. She shook her head and went inside, but I heard her laugh softly to herself just before her door closed. And I stood in that hallway and held onto that sound the way you hold onto something you don't want to lose. It was a Thursday evening, middle of October, when I first saw the real size of her heart. I was heading back from the parking garage, arms full of groceries, when I noticed the door to apartment 4D sitting slightly open. Mrs. Pellegrino's apartment. The elderly Italian woman who shuffled to the mailbox every morning in the same pale blue robe and never seemed to have visitors. Through the gap, I saw Vivienne. She was inside Mrs. Pellegrino's apartment, quietly unpacking a bag of groceries into the woman's refrigerator, moving carefully, almost reverently, like she didn't want to disturb anything. Mrs. Pellegrino was sitting in her armchair, saying something in a mix of Italian and English, and Vivienne was nodding and responding and laughing at whatever the old woman said. A full laugh this time, unguarded and bright, and so completely different from every careful smile I'd seen in the hallway that it stopped me in my tracks. I stood there longer than I should have. There was no note on that grocery bag, no announcement, no expectation of credit. She was just there, doing a quiet, generous thing for a woman who needed it, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I stepped back before she could see me, but I filed it away somewhere important, the way you file away evidence of something you're beginning to deeply believe in. Then came the night of the storm. November had arrived cold and fast, the way November does in Charlotte. One day golden, the next gray and mean. I had a load of laundry that had been sitting in my closet for an embarrassing number of days, and at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night, I finally surrendered to it and took the elevator down to the basement's laundry room. She was already there, standing at the far machine, sorting a pile of clothes with the focused, no-nonsense efficiency of someone who does not trust other people to handle her things. She looked up when I walked in, gave me the careful smile. "Laundry Tuesday for you too?" I said. "More like laundry desperation," she said. "Same," I admitted. We worked in comfortable parallel quiet for a few minutes, the machines starting up around us with their low, rhythmic hum. And then the rain came. Not a gentle rain, the kind of Charlotte downpour that sounds like the sky is collapsing in sheets. Sudden and total, hammering the single high window of the laundry room until the glass shook in its frame. The lights flickered once. We both looked up at the exact same moment. "Great," she said. "Wonderful," I agreed. And just like that, we were laughing. Both of us. At the same time, for no reason except the pure absurdity of it. The shared helplessness of two people trapped in a basement laundry room while the sky made its dramatic announcement outside. And something in that room shifted. Quietly, without ceremony. The way a lock turns when the right key finally finds it. We talked. I don't know exactly how it started. I don't know who said what first. But somewhere between the rinse cycle and the spin cycle, We stopped being two careful neighbors, exchanging polite nods, and became two actual people finally talking to each other. She told me she'd spent 6 years working for a high-end catering company in Charlotte, climbing steadily, becoming indispensable, learning every corner of that business until she could run it in her sleep. She was good at it, genuinely good. But somewhere along the way, she'd confused being good at something with loving it. One morning I woke up and I felt nothing about going in, she said. Not dread, not excitement, just nothing. And nothing is the scariest thing. What did you do? I asked. I gave my notice on a Thursday, she said simply. Started building my own business that Saturday. That's terrifying, I said. It was the best and worst thing I ever did, she said. In that exact order. I told her about my old firm, the 7 years, the slow, invisible erosion of something I used to love, eaten away by politics and compromises and projects I took because they were profitable instead of because they meant anything. I told her about the morning I sat in a glass conference room presenting a design I didn't believe in to clients I didn't respect, and felt something inside me go completely quiet. I walked out at lunch, I said. Didn't go back. She looked at me differently after that, like I'd handed her something she immediately recognized. Something that felt like her own experience wearing a different coat. People think jumping is the crazy part, she said slowly. But the crazy part is staying when you already know the truth. We were quiet for a moment after that. Just the rain outside, and the machines around us, and the low hum of a building full of people going about their lives. Then she said it, quietly, casually, like it was small. I have a complicated relationship with the mirror, and just let it sit there between us. I knew what she was doing. She was testing me, dropping something heavy into the conversation, and watching to see if I'd pick it up or politely step around it the way most people do, offering me an easy exit wrapped in a throwaway confession. I didn't take the exit. What does that mean? I asked quietly. She looked at me sideways, that careful, measuring look, deciding whether the question was genuine or performative. It means I know what I look like, Marcus, she said, like that was explanation enough. Like any reasonable person would simply understand and move on. I know what you look like too, I said. I'm still not sure what that has to do with the mirror. The words landed differently than she expected. I could see it happen in real time. The slight shift in her expression, the recalibration. She'd prepared for gentle agreement wrapped in reassurance. She hadn't prepared for someone to simply and quietly refuse the premise. She turned back to her laundry. You're kind, she said finally. I'm accurate, I said. There's a difference. She didn't answer that, but she didn't move away either. And the air between us felt different now. Warmer, more honest. Like two people who had finally discovered the real room underneath the polite room they'd been standing in for weeks. We stayed in that laundry room for almost 2 hours. She talked about her mother, who had made wedding cakes from their home in Georgia and taught Vivian before either of them had words for it, that baking was a love language, that feeding people something beautiful was one of the purest ways to say, I see you, I care about you, you matter. I told her about my father, the particular quiet difficulty of loving someone who doesn't know how to be loved back, the way you spend years trying different approaches, different angles, before you finally accept that some doors only open from the inside. She listened without trying to fix it. Just listened, fully present in a way that felt rare, like she understood that sometimes being heard is the whole thing. At some point, she told me about a 3-tiered cake she was currently designing for a couple in Myers Park, hand-painted florals. 12 sugar butterflies she was sculpting one fragile wing at a time. Can I see it when it's done? I asked. She paused, like the question surprised her, like nobody had asked before. Yeah, she said. Okay. We rode the elevator back upstairs together, both carrying our laundry baskets, and stood for a moment in the hallway outside our doors. The quiet, warm kind of moment that doesn't need filling. That was good, she said finally, and like she was slightly surprised by the word and had chosen it very carefully. Yeah, I said. It really was. She nodded once, reached for her door. Then, just before she went inside, she turned back. Marcus. Yeah, the lavender cake, she said. The first night. You said it was the most wonderful thing in the apartment. I did. A breath. A pause just long enough to be deliberate. It wasn't the frosting I was testing, she said quietly. I already know that recipe by heart. The cake, the frosting, I've made them 100 times. She looked at me steadily. I just wanted a reason to knock on your door first. But then I lost my nerve, and she went inside. I stood in that hallway for a full 30 seconds after a door clicked shut. She had wanted to knock on my door, before I ever knocked on hers. For weeks she had wanted to. And she had stood in her kitchen and talked herself out of it every single time, using every word Derek had planted in her head like landmines. Until the safest thing she could do was send a slice of cake across the hall with a practical question about lavender. That's what he'd done to her. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had broken her permission to try. I went inside, sat on my couch in the dark for a long time, and I made a quiet decision. Not a loud one, not a declaration, just a slow, internal rearranging of everything I was willing to give. A few weeks later, she sent me a photo at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. One message. Done. I stared at my phone screen. The Myers Park cake. 3 tiers of pale ivory. Hand-painted wisteria climbing the sides in shades of violet and silver green. 12 sugar butterflies arranged as if they just landed mid-flight. It looked like something from a dream. I typed, "This is art." A long pause, then, "It's just someone's wedding cake." Exactly, I wrote. Someone gets to begin their marriage standing next to something you made with your own hands. That's not nothing. That's everything. The pause that followed was so long I wondered if I'd pushed too far, gone past the invisible line she still needed in place. Then my phone lit up. I never thought about it like that. And then, 60 seconds later, "Thank you, Marcus." I set my phone on my chest and looked at the ceilings and thought about her. This generous, brilliant, quietly wounded woman on the other side of that wall, rebuilding herself one cake at a time in the privacy of an apartment she rarely left. And I made up my mind. I picked up my phone and typed, "There's a farmer's market Saturday morning. Good vendor for cinnamon rolls. I need a second opinion from someone with an actual palate. Low stakes. We walk back if it's terrible. What do you think?" I watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again, disappear again. My heart doing something completely undignified in my chest. Then, what time? I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. 9 o'clock. I'll knock. Her reply came immediately this time. Okay. Just that one word. 4 letters. I read it 10 times like it was a full chapter. She was going to say yes. She was going to put on her coat and walk out of that apartment and stand beside me in the cold morning air and let herself have one ordinary, hopeful, human Saturday morning. What I didn't know yet, what neither of us could have predicted, was what was going to happen at that market. What a stranger was going to say in a loud voice that was never meant to be kind. What it was going to cost her hear it, and what it was finally going to force me to do. The one moment that would change absolutely everything. For good. The kind of December morning that makes Charlotte look like a painting. The sky, a deep, impossible blue, the air carrying that particular sharp bite that turns your breath to soft clouds and makes everything feel more awake than usual. I knocked on 4B at exactly 9 o'clock. I heard movement inside, a pause, then the sound of the lock turning. She opened the door in a red wool coat I had never seen before. Dark hair down around her shoulders, a small gold earring catching the light. And those brown eyes, cautious as always, but underneath the caution, something else. Something she was trying very hard not to show. She was nervous, the good kind. The kind that means something matters. "Ready?" I said. She looked at me for just a moment. Then, yeah. We walked out into that blue Saturday morning together. And something about the way she moved outside. Away from the building, away from the familiar safety of the 4th floor, was different. She didn't press herself against anything. There were no walls to hug out here, no narrow hallway to shrink into. Just open air and open sidewalk and the two of us, walking side by side toward the farmer's market on Davidson Street. close enough that our arms almost touched with every step. She came alive at that market. I want you to understand what I mean by that. Not performed happiness, not the careful smile I'd learned to read. I mean, she lit up from somewhere deep and genuine and unstoppable. She stopped at a honey vendor and asked the woman behind the table 3 specific questions about her bees and their range, and the difference between the spring batch and the fall batch. She held a bar of handmade lavender soap up to her nose and closed her eyes for a full 5 seconds. She argued with me about whether a particular jar of fig jam was worth the price. She said yes. I said maybe. She bought 2 and handed me one without asking. Consider it research, she said. Research into what? I asked. Into whether your taste is as underdeveloped as I suspect. I laughed. She grinned. And for the space of that moment, walking through that crowded, loud, cold, beautiful market with a jar of fig jam in my hand, and this woman next to me, I felt something so simple it almost didn't have a name. Happy. I was just happy. We found the cinnamon roll vendor near the east end of the market. The smell hit us from 15 feet away, warm butter and brown sugar and yeast, and she stopped walking mid-step and put one hand on my arm. That, she said very seriously, is what I'm here for. We got 2 each, found a low stone wall nearby, and sat on it side by side, shoulders almost touching, eating cinnamon rolls in the December air while the market moved and hummed around us. She took her first bite and closed her eyes. Okay, she said quietly. You were right. I usually am, I said. She opened her eyes and looked at me sideways. Don't ruin it. We sat there longer than we needed to, talking, laughing. Her telling me about a disastrous fondant incident from early in her business that had resulted in an entire cake sliding off a table at a bridal shower. Me telling her about the time I accidentally designed a water feature for a client that flooded their entire lower garden. Both of us laughing harder with every detail added, the kind of laughter that feeds itself. And then we got up to leave. We were passing the cider stand near the market exit when it happened. I heard him before I registered what he was saying. A man in his 40s standing near a friend, both of them facing our direction, his voice carrying the particular casual cruelty of someone who has never once been held accountable for what his mouth produces. He nodded, directly, unmistakably, at Vivienne, and said to his friend with a grin that made my stomach turn, "What's a guy like that doing with a girl like that?" The words hit the air between us like something thrown. I felt her change. Right beside me, not a gasp, something quieter and far more devastating, like a light being turned off from the inside. Like every careful wall she'd spent, 2 years building, had just been proven necessary in a single sentence. 2 years of Derek. 2 years of believing the worst version of herself. And this stranger had just handed her the confirmation she'd always feared was waiting. I did not think. I did not calculate. I stepped toward her. Not away, not sideways, not into polite silence. I stepped directly, deliberately toward her, and I reached down and took her hand in mine for the very first time. Her fingers were cold from the morning air. I held them anyway. Held them like they were something I intended to keep. Then I turned and looked at that man with a steadiness I didn't know I had. I'm spending my morning with the most interesting woman I've met in years, I said. Level, clear, not a performance, a fact. I'd call that the best Saturday I've had in a very long time. I turned back to Viv. Her eyes were bright and wet and wide, fixed on my face like she was trying to understand something she didn't quite have the vocabulary for yet. More cider? I said quietly. She shook her head once, and she did not let go of my hand. She held it all the way to the end of the market, and then, just before we turned onto our street, she let go, gently, like she hadn't decided whether she was allowed to have held it in the first place. I didn't say anything, didn't reach for it again, just walked beside her. The silence between us on the way home was the kind that carries weight. Not uncomfortable, weighted, full of something neither of us had said yet. Finally, half a block from the building, she spoke. You didn't have to do that. I know, I said. People are going to think. I don't care what people think, I said. And you shouldn't have to either. She was quiet for a full block after that. And then, carefully, in the voice she used when something cost her to say, "It's not that simple. When you've been told enough times." She stopped. Started again. "There was someone before. We were engaged." I waited. Let the silence hold space for whatever she needed to put into it. "His name was Derek," she said. The name fell like a stone dropped into still water. 3 years together. 2 months before our wedding, he took me to dinner. She paused, and he sat across from me and told me, in front of everyone around us, that I had let myself go, that he deserved someone who took care of herself. She said those words in quotation marks, reciting them the way you recite something you memorized against your will. He stood up, and he left. I sat there alone, while the whole restaurant pretended not to notice. The air felt different after she said that, heavier, like the city itself got quieter. "I walked home by myself that night," she said, "and I decided that was it. I was done expecting anything different from anyone." I didn't speak immediately, because some things deserve more than an immediate response. Some things deserve the respect of a real silence before you answer them. "He wasn't describing you," I said finally. "He was describing his own failure, his own smallness, and he handed it to you to carry because he didn't want to carry it himself." She stopped walking. Right there on the sidewalk, half a block from home, she stopped and looked at me, and I could see it, the war happening behind her eyes, between the part of her that wanted to believe me and the part of her that had spent 2 years being trained not to. "I don't want to be your charity case, Marcus," she said, low, direct, brave in the way that only deeply wounded people are brave. "I know that's this word that's been sitting in your mouth this whole walk home," I said, "and I need you to hear me say this clearly. There is nothing charitable about what I feel when I'm around you. Nothing. I look for your light under the door at night. I look forward to your footsteps in the hallway. I listened to you explain the structural difference between Swiss and Italian meringue for 20 minutes and genuinely did not want you to stop talking." I paused. Let that land. "That is not kindness, Vivienne. That is just the truth about you. And the only reason it feels unbelievable is because someone taught you not to believe it." She stood on that sidewalk and looked at me, the cold air around us, the sound of the city moving at its ordinary Saturday pace, indifferent to the fact that something enormous was happening in this small square of it. "I'm scared," she said. Honest, bare, no deflection, no joke to soften it. "I know," I said. "I'm not asking you to stop being scared. I'm asking you to decide if I'm worth the risk." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. We rode the elevator up in silence, got off at the 4th floor, stood in the hallway outside our doors, and she looked at me for a long moment, searching, measuring, wanting, and then she said goodnight and went inside. I stood there in that hallway listening to the click of her lock, and I waited. She pulled back after that, not dramatically, not a slammed door or a cold shoulder, just a gentle dimming. The music through the wall a little softer, the hallway exchanges a little shorter, the careful smile back in place where the real one had been. I understood it. That didn't make it easier. I left one note under her door, just one. I slid it through on a Thursday evening and walked back to my apartment, and did not stand there waiting to hear her pick it up. It said, "Viv, take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be in 4A whenever you're ready to find me. Marcus." Then I let her go. The way you let go of something you trust, not abandoning it, just opening your hands. I kept living. I worked. I cooked badly and ate it without complaint. I carried Mrs. Pellegrino's groceries up 4 flights when the elevator broke, and she held my face in both hands and called me a good soul in Italian, and I thought, even on the hardest days, this building has goodness in it. I did not count the days. I counted 9 of them. On the 9th evening at 8:15, I heard a knock at my door. Not a timid knock, a decided one. The knock of someone who has made up their mind after a long internal argument and is committed now. Fully, finally committed. I opened the door. Vivian Hartley was standing in the hallway in a cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she was barefoot. She had walked across that hall without shoes, which told me everything about the urgency. and the courage of whatever she had decided. In her hands she was holding a small, perfectly finished round cake. Ivory frosting, smooth and flawless. Delicate gold leaf pressed carefully along the bottom edge. The work of someone who had poured intention into every centimeter. And on the top, written in her precise, beautiful, unmistakable script, "You were right." 4B. I looked at the cake. Then I looked at her. "It's lemon olive oil," she said. Her voice was steadier than her eyes. "You mentioned once that lemon was your favorite. Last month. You said it casually. I don't even think you remember." But I remembered. "I do remember," I said. "I practiced the message," she said, a small breath of a laugh escaping with it. "The lettering. I did it over 4 times before I got it right." "It's perfect," I said. "I'm still scared," she said. "I know," I said. "Come in anyway." She came in. She brought the cake. I made coffee. We sat on my couch, and she tucked her bare feet underneath her, and we talked. Really talked. The way you talk when you have finally stopped protecting yourself from someone. She told me that she had watched me those 9 days, that she'd cracked her door open and watched me carry Mrs. Pellegrino's groceries up without being asked, watched me hold the elevator for the exhausted mother from the 3rd floor, and her stroller, watched me come home late on a Wednesday with a container of soup that I left at Mrs. Pellegrino's door with no knock. "I needed to see who you were when you thought nobody was watching," she said. "And?" I said. She looked at me with those brown eyes, soft and open and no longer calculating. "Just present. Just here. You're the same person," she said. "You're exactly the same person when nobody's watching as when I'm standing right in front of you." "That's the only way I know how to be," I said. She nodded slowly. Like she was putting something down that she had been carrying for a very long time. "Derek used to say different things in public than he said at home," she said quietly. "I thought that was just how men were, how relationships were. I thought the version at home was the honest one, and the public version was just performance. With me it's the same version," I said. "What you see is what there is." She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said the most honest thing she had ever said to me. The most unguarded, unprotected, bravest thing. "I think I forgot what it felt like to be someone worth choosing," she said. "And I think I was so busy making cakes for everyone else's love stories that I stopped believing I was allowed to have one." Something tightened in my chest so fiercely I had to take a slow breath before I spoke. "You were never not worth choosing," I said. "There was never a version of you that wasn't worth it. Derek made a decision about his own limitations, and he handed it to you and called it a verdict about your value. And you, because you loved him and trusted him, you believed him." I leaned forward. "But he was wrong. He was completely, entirely, factually wrong. And I need you to hear that not as a compliment, as a correction." Her eyes filled. One tear broke. She caught it with the back of her wrist, half laughing at herself, the way people do when they have been holding something for so long that the release surprises them. "I really did spend 4 tries on that lettering," she managed. "It shows," I said. "Every one of those 4 tries was worth it." She laughed again, and then she looked at me, clear-eyed and warm and fully finally here. "Okay," she said softly. "I'm done running." I reached over and took her hand. The same hand I had taken at the market, but different now. Not protective, not declarative. Just mine holding hers because that was where it belonged. We sat there until long past midnight, talking and laughing and sitting in the comfortable quiet that belongs only to people who have decided to stop performing for each other. At some point she fell asleep against my shoulder, her breathing slow and even. The city sat outside the window, carrying on its quiet nighttime life. I didn't move. I sat very still with her sleeping against me and Anita Baker coming softly through the wall from her apartment where she'd left the speaker on. And I thought about everything it had taken to get here. Every closed door, every careful smile, every note slid under a door, every night she had stood in her kitchen and talked herself out of hoping. All of it had led to this exact moment, and this moment was worth every single piece of it. A year later, I want to tell you what Vivienne Hartley looks like now. She takes up space, the full, glorious, unapologetic kind. She walks down hallways in the center, not the edge. She laughs loudly in public without checking first whether she's allowed to. She stands behind her market table at the Davidson Street vendor fair and lets people come to her. And they come. They always come. Because her work is extraordinary, and she no longer pretends it isn't. She started teaching a Saturday baking class for teenage girls from the community center 2 blocks over. 12 girls, ages 13 to 17, learning to make something beautiful with their own hands, while a woman who once believed she was invisible shows them, by example, what it looks like to stand fully in your own light. Mrs. Pellegrino calls her the sunshine of the 4th floor. She is not wrong by even the smallest measurement. The apartment in 4B still smells like lavender honey on the evenings she's testing something new. The music through the wall is still Stevie Wonder when she's working, and Anita Baker when something in her is tender. But the Anita Baker nights are rarer now. Not because the tenderness is gone, but because she has somewhere to put it. She has someone to put it with. There is a photograph on my phone that I took without her knowing on a Sunday morning in March. She is standing at my kitchen counter in a white shirt with flower on the sleeve and the early light coming through the window, and she is looking down at whatever she's making with that private smile, the one that starts on the start side, starts first, the one she still doesn't know she does, the one she will still deny if you mention it. That photograph is my lock screen. It has been my lock screen for 8 months. It will be my lock screen for a very long time, because that smile, unguarded and private and real, is what it looks like when a person finally stops believing the worst thing anyone ever told them about themselves. That is what it looks like when someone decides they are worth it. And the only thing I want to say to you, the only thing I need you to take with you when this story ends, is this. She was always worth it. She was worth it on the night Derek left her sitting alone in that restaurant. She was worth it. On every day she pressed herself against that hallway wall. She was worth it every single night. She baked alone behind a closed door and gave away her love in the form of wedding cakes for people whose happiness she had stopped believing she would ever share. She was always worth it. The only thing that changed was that she finally let someone close enough to show her. And now, before you go, I want to ask you something. Because this story isn't really about me and Vivienne. How many people in your life are pressing themselves against the wall right now? Shrinking, disappearing, apologizing for existing. Because someone who should have loved them better taught them they were too much or not enough. And when was the last time you stepped closer to someone instead of away? Not because it was comfortable, but because something in you knew it was right. And most importantly, if someone has been handing you their failures and calling them your verdict, when are you finally going to put that down? Because you were never the problem. You were always worth it. And somewhere, in a hallway, in a laundry room, in a cold farmer's market on a December morning, someone is already looking for a reason to step closer to you. Don't make yourself so small that they can't find you.